Hey friends, welcome back to Homestead on a Prayer. In case you're new here, my name's Jennifer. Today is one of my absolute favorite days of the year, and that is the day that we start tomato seeds. So as you can see, I've got my tray all set up here. There's a couple pepper seedlings in here already that we separated out together a couple days ago, but the rest of these empty pots here are for my tomatoes, and we are going to be starting tomato seeds today. Now in this video, I'm not really going to go into all the details of exactly how to start seeds. I did post a video a couple weeks ago where we planted peppers together, and in that video I went into a lot more detail about exactly what you do to start seeds. I'll go ahead and link that video in the video description, so if you're looking for more of an informational how-to kind of video, you can start tomato seeds exactly the same way that you start pepper seeds. So as I said, I'll link that below. So today we are going to be focusing on what varieties I'm growing this year. Now, every year when it comes time to choose the tomato varieties that I'm going to grow, I come to the conclusion that I need a bigger garden with a lot more space. There are so many amazing tomato varieties out there that it is so hard to choose and narrow it down. And then to make things even harder on myself, last year my gardener was having an end of the season grab bag sale, so I decided to get a grab bag. And in that grab bag were a bunch of new tomato varieties, a lot of which I'd never even heard of. So in addition to all the tomatoes I already wanted to grow this year, I got some more varieties added to my list as well. So what you'll find in my garden this year is that I'm going to be growing very few of each variety, but I'm growing a lot of different varieties. So I'm just going to go through and share with you guys what varieties I'm growing. I think I've grown probably about half of these before. So the ones that I have grown before, I'll tell you a little about them. And the ones that are new to me, I'll just kind of share why I decided to try those out. So let's start with cherry tomatoes first. So I think I'm growing 8 varieties of cherry tomatoes this year. 4 of them I've grown before, and they're kind of my go-to favorites. The other 4 are completely new to me. So let's just dive right in. First tomato variety that I'm growing, this is Matt's Wild Cherry. Now this one is kind of a small red cherry tomato. These plants are really prolific. This is one of my go-tos that I plant every year. Now when I'm planning out what tomato varieties I'm going to grow, this applies to both cherry tomatoes and large slicer tomatoes. I like to make sure that I'm going to have a real variety of colors and a variety of flavor profiles. So this Matt's Wild Cherry kind of fits the bill for my go-to red cherry tomato variety. So it's very dependable, so we're growing that one. Another one of my go-tos, and this is my all-time favorite cherry tomato, is Sun Gold. Now these tomatoes are beautiful, delicious, sweet, with I think enough acidity in them to really balance out the sweetness, so it's not just eating sugar. It's got a real complex tomato flavor, I think. And I think these are probably one of the most popular cherry tomato varieties grown, and there's a good reason for that. They're really dependable, they're really delicious, and it gives you kind of that golden orange tomato color, so I really enjoy those. The next variety, this one I've only grown one time before. I grew this last year for the very first time. This is called Sun Gold Select, and it is extremely similar to the Sun Gold tomato that I just showed you. Basically the difference is that Sun Gold Select is an open pollinated variety. So basically what open pollinated means is it's kind of similar to an heirloom in that if you save seeds from that tomato and then you plant those seeds, you're going to get the same plant. So it's basically going to produce the same type of tomatoes for you, as opposed to a hybrid tomato. Now you can, in theory, save seeds from a hybrid tomato, you just don't know exactly what you're going to get. And because Sun Gold is pretty much my all-time favorite cherry tomato, I wanted to make sure that I had a dependable seed source for it. So again this year I'm going to be trialing the Sun Gold Select, and I will be saving seeds from that so that I can have my own, so that I can kind of have my own dependable source of seeds for one of my favorite tomatoes. Now the last one that I've grown in the past is the black cherry tomato. This one is really good and delicious. Now if you're familiar with tomatoes in general, you know that the tomatoes that are called black, they're really kind of more of like a deep smoky purple color. I really love the flavor that those tomatoes have, and black cherry really brings you that flavor in a cherry tomato. Plus it is a great color variety. It's like, as I said, kind of a dark smoky purple color. And it's a really nice contrast to the bright golden orange and the bright red tomatoes that we're growing. Now I also have 4 new cherry tomato varieties, so I'm just going to share those with you guys. The first one is the red centiflora tomato. This is by M.I. Gardner, and basically the reason I'm growing this is Luke from M.I. Gardner did a post, I want to say it was probably on his company's Facebook page, about this tomato last year, and it sounded so good that I just wanted to try it. I really do love the Matt's Wild Cherry Tomato, but it is a really small cherry tomato. Now, honestly, these look like they're probably pretty small too, so they might be around the same size as the Matt's Wild Cherry, but I wanted to kind of try another variety of reds just to have a little more size variation and just a little more variety in general. The next one I'm growing, and if I had to pick one of the new varieties that I'm most excited about this year, I think it would be this one. This is the Rosella tomato. Now that tomato is beautiful. It's a really similar color to the black cherry that I was describing. It's, again, got that smoky purple. And while I really love to have a variety of tomatoes, both in color and flavor, I find that I am really drawn to some of those really richly flavored, richly colored types. And this one just looked beautiful, so I'm really excited to try this one. The next new variety that I'm growing this year, this is one that has come highly recommended by a lot of people that I follow, and it just looks really delicious and fun, and it's a color that I don't have yet, so you know I had to try it. This is the Berries Crazy Cherry. Now this one is more of a lighter yellow as opposed to the Sun Gold and the Sun Gold Select. Those are really more of like a richer golden orange color. And I just thought that this one looked really good. This is supposed to yield really abundantly, be really dependable, and I just thought it would be a fun one to try. So I'm pretty excited about that one too. Now the last cherry tomato that I'm trying this year, this one was not actually on my radar. This was sent to me by Baker Creek as a free sample when I placed a seed order with them. I think whenever you spend at least $10 with them, they send you a free seed packet. So this is what they sent me this time, which is the spoon tomato. As you can see, those tomatoes are tiny little red tomatoes. So I think that will definitely be a fun one to try. I know my daughter is really excited about this one, so I'm definitely going to be growing some of these for her. And I'm hoping that these will be really good. So I think these are what's considered a currant tomato, which, I mean, as you can see in that spoon there, they're teeny tiny little tomatoes. So I think this will just kind of be a fun novelty variety. So that's all that I have for cherry tomatoes. So let's move on to the big slicer tomatoes. All right, so similarly to the cherry tomatoes, I have quite a few varieties that I've grown before and really love. I also have a lot of new varieties that I'm trying this year. Now, incidentally, I was hoping to film this video outside. As you can probably see behind me on my deck, it snowed last night, despite the fact that it is the middle of March and really should basically be spring. It snowed. So we are filming this video inside today, and so hopefully the lighting is okay for you guys. So let's just jump right in and talk about the big slicer tomatoes that I'm growing. As you can see, I've got a nice thick stack of seed packets here, so quite a few varieties. The first one that I'm growing this year is the Pink Brandywine. Now this is a classic heirloom tomato. It's probably, I would say, maybe the most famous heirloom tomato, and it is really delicious. I actually did not grow this tomato last year. I do grow it most years. I really enjoy the flavor of it. It's got a really good richness. It's nice and meaty. And for an heirloom, it actually is, in my experience, more disease resistant than a lot of the other heirlooms that I grow. So I find that a positive. Now, I've also heard other people say the opposite. So it might kind of depend on your individual climate and the area of the country you're growing in. So I would say to go ahead and give it a try and see if it works for you. Now, this one does yield a little bit later in the season than a lot of the other tomatoes that I'm growing. So while that might sound at first like a negative, I actually find that isn't that bad. I have a lot of other tomatoes that yield fairly early for me, and so sometimes those tomatoes are kind of starting to slow down by the time the Brandywine starts yielding, which gives you kind of a little boost in the tomato season. So I actually don't really mind that it's late. So the next slicer tomato that I'm growing this year is one that I grew last year for the first time. It didn't yield as much for me as some of my other varieties. The tomatoes that it did yield were beautiful and delicious, so I'm going to try it again. I think the fact that it didn't yield as much might be kind of due to some weather conditions that we had, so I'm going to give it another try. And honestly, even if it only yields a little bit, I think it's worth growing for its beauty and uniqueness, and that is the Black Beauty tomato. Now, as you can see, this tomato is a really rich, dark color, almost black. And it really just is stunning, especially in a mixed tomato basket. It really stands out from a lot of those really brightly colored tomatoes. Now, when you grow a tomato like that, it can be a little bit tricky to determine whether or not it's ripe. Basically, the black color is only on the skin. It's a pigment that's produced on the skin in response to sunlight. So anywhere the sun shines on that tomato, it's going to develop that really rich, dark color. So what you want to do to determine ripeness is to look at the bottom of the tomato, and when that changes to the color that you want, in this case it's going to be a nice rich red color. Once it changes to that ripe color, then the tomato's ripe. You also want to feel for softness. When the tomato starts to feel ever so slightly soft, that's another good sign that it's ripe. But overall, I'm really excited to grow that tomato. I think I'm only going to grow one plant of that variety just because it didn't yield as well for me as some of my other tomatoes. But honestly, even if it only gives me a few tomatoes, I think it's worth growing just for its uniqueness and beauty. Now the next variety that I'm growing is the Paul Robeson. You can see here that these are seeds I saved last year. I kind of decided to grow this variety on a whim last year. I had a packet of old seeds. They were several years old. I planted them and none of them germinated, or I thought none of them germinated, until all of a sudden late in the season, I looked at my pot of seedlings and saw that one had a seedling in it. It germinated kind of late. So what I decided to do, obviously the germination of those seedlings, or the germination of those seeds had gone down quite a bit. So what I decided to do was to save my own seeds so I had a new fresh supply. So I saved these last year. Now this is a really dark red tomato. I would probably almost consider it sort of almost a purple tomato, kind of along the lines of like a Cherokee purple or something like that. It has a really nice rich flavor. We really enjoyed it last year, so I'm going to be growing it again this year. The next variety that I'm growing is the Horizon tomato. Now this is a tomato that I had not even heard of until last year. As you can see, this says trial packet on it. This was sent to me as a free sample by a seed company when I ordered some other seeds from them. And I decided to give it a try, and I was actually really pleasantly surprised with these tomatoes. Now it yielded a lot of smallish tomatoes. If you ever at the grocery store get those little tomatoes that come in the plastic package, I think they're usually called like Campari tomatoes. This is similar in size to those. It has a good flavor and a dependable yield. I got a lot of tomatoes off of it. They were kind of, a lot of tomatoes that you grow in your garden can look a little bit weird and crazy. These were they looked like the classic red grocery store tomatoes. They were basically perfect with how they looked, and they had a really good flavor too. I'm mostly growing this one because I was impressed with the yield, so I think I'm planting 2 plants of this. I have my notebook over here where I made a list of how many plants I ultimately want to end up with of each variety, and then basically what I'm doing is planting a couple extra in case I have some that don't germinate. So we'll be growing a couple of these Horizon tomatoes this year. Now this next tomato I'm not planting today, but I will most likely be growing it this year. This is the Martinez Roma tomato. Basically what I did last year with this tomato, which ended up working really well, was I started some seeds later in the season to give myself a crop of fall tomatoes. And what I did was I timed it so that when I harvested all my garlic and pulled my garlic out, these tomatoes would be ready to go into the spot where the garlic was. So sometime in July, I will probably be transplanting these out to the garden. Now that is late for tomatoes. So if you're going to try that, you want to get a fairly early maturing variety. Actually, probably an earlier maturing variety than this would be ideal, but this is what I have, so I'm going to use that. Now this is a determinate tomato. So that basically means rather than yielding its tomatoes a few at a time throughout the season, it's going to make a crop of tomatoes and yield them all at once. That is what I wanted because my goal with these last year was to get a harvest with them right before the frost, basically, get them all at once, and then those would be my preserving tomatoes for the year. So I'm going to try that again this year. I think I'm going to try to plant them out a couple weeks earlier than I did last year. Last year I didn't plant them out right when I harvested the garlic. There were a few weeks in between. This year I want to have them ready to go out right when I harvest the garlic. So again, as I said, I'm not planting these today, but I'll be starting these probably around the beginning of May. I'll keep you updated about that whenever I end up starting these. All right, my next tomato is my favorite slicer tomato, and this is the Cherokee Purple. Now, year after year, Cherokee Purple is really dependable for me. It yields really well for me. The tomatoes are delicious. I really enjoy them. So, as you could probably guess from the name, it's a nice purple tomato. It's one of those kind of dark smoky tomatoes that I mentioned before. It has a great flavor, and again, I find it really dependable, so I grow that one every year. Now, this next tomato I tried last year for the very first time, and that is the Climbing Triple Crop. I was really impressed with this tomato last year. It yielded really well for me. It gave me really nice big red tomatoes. I really enjoyed it, and because of that, I'll be growing a few plants of this year. Now this next tomato that I'm growing, I think I'm only going to grow one plant of this tomato. I've grown this the past 2 years, and I've been overall happy with it. The tomatoes are beautiful. As you can kind of see from that picture there, they're very fluted. It makes for a really interesting tomato. They're just kind of ridged, and especially when you slice them, they're really beautiful. I did find that this tomato was a little bit more prone to blossom end rot than a lot of the other varieties that I grew. The first few tomatoes of the season, both years that I grew it, did have blossom end rot and had to be tossed. But I liked the final tomatoes that it yielded really well. It did yield quite a few tomatoes. So because of that, I'll be growing one plant of this year. Now this tomato is also going to be grown for the second year in my garden, and that is the Dr. Weish's yellow tomato. I was happy with this tomato last year. It didn't yield as much as some of my other tomatoes, but the tomatoes that it did yield were really large and really meaty and had a delicious flavor. So I think I'll probably only grow one plant of this just because it doesn't yield as many tomatoes, but I did really enjoy the tomatoes that it yielded. And as you can see, it's that nice, beautiful golden color. So that makes a really nice contrast to a lot of the red tomatoes and darker tomatoes that I'm growing. Now these next 3 tomatoes all came in my MI Gardener grab bag that I mentioned. Now, I got so many varieties of tomatoes in that grab bag, plus I had tomatoes that I wanted to grow this year for the first time, and of course I had to make sure that I included my tried and true favorites, which all added up to being more varieties than I really had space for. But of course I need to find space somewhere. So these were 3 tomatoes that I was not necessarily as excited about as some of the other varieties, but I still wanted to give them a try. So I will be setting aside a large pot on my deck for each of these and growing one of each of these on my deck. The first one is the Pink Oxheart. Now I have heard good things about this tomato. It wasn't really on my radar until I got it in the grab bag. I did want to give it a try, so I'll be growing one of these on my deck, and if it does really well, then I may put some in the ground next year. The next variety is the Wisconsin 55. Now I'll be growing one of these on my deck as well. One of the reasons I decided to grow this on the deck was it sounds like, I've never grown this before, but it sounds like this is probably a smaller tomato plant with smaller tomatoes, and so I figured it might do better in a pot than some of these larger varieties. And this looks like it's supposed to be fairly early. I'm not sure. It looks like the maturity date is actually pretty similar to a lot of my other tomatoes. So we'll be giving this one a try and seeing how it does. And the last variety that I'm going to grow in a pot on my deck is the Evergreen tomato. Now I mentioned, if you watched that seed haul video about this grab bag, I have never really been too excited to try green tomatoes. Something about them, you know, that might be completely unjustified because I've honestly never grown green tomatoes before, so maybe they are a lot better than I'm imagining them to be. But I've just been so captivated by all those beautiful bright colors that really stand out from the foliage. The green tomato never really appealed to me. But since I got one in a grab bag, I decided that maybe that was a sign that I had to try this tomato. So I am going to give one of these a try on my deck, and we will see how it is. Now those last 3 tomato varieties that I mentioned I'll be growing on my deck were varieties that I have not grown together. I do also have a few other varieties that are completely new to me that I'll be trying as well. One is the Azoichka tomato, and kind of similar to the Dr. Weish's, it looks like a big, beautiful golden tomato. I'm pretty excited about this one. I'd honestly never heard of this tomato before. I got this one in the grab bag as well. But when I was reading about it, it sounds like a really great tomato. It says it's a Russian heirloom that yields really well, and I love that golden color. So I'm really excited to try this one. So I think I'm going to grow one of these in the ground in my garden and a second one on my deck. So definitely I will keep you updated on how this tomato does. The next one that I'm going to try is the watermelon beefsteak tomato. This looks like a really large tomato. Now, this is another one that I got in the grab bag that wasn't really on my radar. My daughter saw this seed packet and was really excited to try it. So we are going to give this one a try, and hopefully it'll be really good. I'll keep you updated about that as well. The next one that I'm going to try, I got this in the grab bag as well, is the Stupichka tomato. Now, I had no idea how to pronounce that, but he has this handy little pronunciation guide on the back of the packet there. So that helped me out a little. This one looks like a really early maturing variety, so I'm really excited about that. It's kind of nice. A lot of times I find, now I haven't grown this tomato in particular, but I have found a lot of times with the early maturing varieties, they may not have the same flavor complexity that some of those really late maturing varieties do have, but I think it's worth it just for the sake, I mean, anything you grow at home is still going to be better than what you find at the grocery store. So I think that it's worth growing an early maturing variety, even if it's not necessarily going to be your favorite tomato variety. Something about getting those homegrown tomatoes that much earlier I think is worth it. So I'm excited to try this one as well. The final variety that I'm going to be trying this year, and this is also a new one to me, is the Weaver's Black Brandywine Tomato. Now, I've grown Brandywine a handful of times in the past and been really happy with it. And you know I love those black, purple, the dark tomatoes. I really like them. They have a really good flavor, a really complex flavor, and so I really enjoy them. And I realized that through all those years, I've never grown the Black Brandywine tomato. So I decided it was time to give that a try. So I'm really excited to try that one this year. So that is all the varieties that I'm growing this year, at least all the varieties that I'm planning on growing at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and get my seeds started. As I said, if you're interested in seeing how to start seeds, I'm going to link my seed starting video where we planted pepper seeds together. And I will be sure to keep you guys updated on these tomato plants as they germinate, as we separate them out, and of course how they grow throughout the season. I think at the end of the season, I will do kind of a recap of all these tomato varieties and let you know what I liked and didn't like about each one. So definitely stay tuned for that. So I look forward to growing all these tomatoes. I can't wait for that first taste of summer when the first tomatoes ripe. And I'm really looking forward to growing these tomatoes with you guys and gardening with you all season long. So go ahead in the comments and let me know what variety of tomato are you most excited to grow this year. It can be a tried and true favorite, or it could be something new that you're really excited to try, but I'm really curious to see what you guys are growing this year. So I hope you guys are having a great day. I hope that your gardens are getting off to a great start, and I can't wait to see you guys again soon. Bye guys, I'll see you next time.